Hello and welcome to the DVB Newsroom. I'm Nora. Joining me in studio today is Yeshua Moser Puangsuwan, the author of Burma Country Report for the Landmine Monitor. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Myanmar has become the world's deadliest country for landmines. This is according to the UN Children's Fund and the international campaign to ban landmines. Can you explain how Myanmar has gotten to this point?
It's taken Myanmar a very long time to get to this point. Mines have been used in warfare here for well over 20 years. Almost every combatant group has used landmines, and those landmines have accumulated. Armed conflict has become more severe across many parts of the country. Landmines have been laid there. People are fleeing armed conflict. And so there are more casualties every year. And now the casualties are at a very high rate. And it has surpassed Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, which previously were the countries that had the most landmine casualties in the world. But as of last year, Myanmar became the country with the most landmine casualties in that calendar year.
Who is responsible for the increase in landmine-related casualties?
Everyone who's laying them, which is every armed actor within the country. No armed actor in the country has said we will stop using these things. They continue to be used.
Yeah. After the 2021 coup, which area in Myanmar have been most affected by landmines, and how has this impacted local communities?
For local communities, it's devastating. If you take a look at the breakdown we take a look at what is the activity that civilians are doing that causes them to become casualties. The key activity is going to the forest. If you live in a village, you go to the forest to get thatched for the roof of your house. You go to the forest to get extra food for your diet. You go to the forest for medicinal herbs. People in the villages go to the forest to live, and that is the main cause of injury and death from landmines, followed by people doing agriculture and traveling in the mine-affected areas. The number of mine-affected areas has increased enormously since the coup d'etat, and it's about doubled since 2021.
On March 4th, a child in Myanmar township of Rakhine State was injured by an exploded ordnance. Why do children make up a large number of the casualties in Myanmar?
Because children are curious, and we want them to be, because that's how they learn. And so they're going out into the forest, picking up rocks, looking for things, and they will stumble across unexploded ordnance before adults will in their locality in many cases, because they're looking in strange places. And this is why they make up the majority of casualties of what we would call explosive remnants of war.
So what specific measures can be taken to protect children from landmine and ERW incidents, especially in areas with high levels of contamination?
We encourage all educators to include what we call risk education messages somewhere in their curriculum. This is particularly important for children because a new crop of children comes on every year, no? And so we always have to repeat the messages for them. For adults, one time may be enough in a locality, but children, we have new ones coming on every year, and so the message needs to be repeated in schools every year with basic do not touch unusual items in your environment.
What can be done to raise awareness about landmines and explosive remnants of war? Can you think of any effective strategies on the ground?
People need to raise their voices and say this is not acceptable for the future of our country by anyone, by anyone. The use of landmines is very short term for a military. Maybe it makes a difference in a battle for one day, but it stays in the ground for dozens of years. Take a look at Cambodia. They're still cleaning mines after 30 years. The armed conflict was a long time ago, but that armed conflict is claiming victims today. So there are still war casualties in Cambodia from the war that happened 30 years ago. This is going to be the future for Myanmar. And people have to say, no, we do not want this to be our future. And they have to say it loudly. They have to increase the stigma
What role can international organizations and neighboring countries play in addressing the rising number of landmine casualties in Myanmar?
It depends on whether they have influence on the armed actors, which the majority of them do not. But two of your neighbors, Thailand and Bangladesh, have joined the Mine Ban Treaty. They've destroyed their stockpiles. They've cleaned their ground of that. I have been on the Thai-Myanmar border with the Royal Thai Army where they were doing the clearance, and they cleared it all the way up to the borderline. And so they can help by their influence of what they've already done. They don't use this weapon anymore, and they should encourage all actors on the other side not to use it either. It doesn't hurt Thailand and Bangladesh directly, but indirectly, because people are fleeing their villages, it does impact them.
Are there any successful models from other countries that could be applied to Myanmar, and how can international funding be effectively utilized to support mine action efforts?
The first part of it, the models are the vast majority of countries in this world, even those who still have civil wars within their borders, who have said we will no longer use anti-personnel lines. So Colombia, there's still an insurgency going on. Philippines, there's still an insurgency going on. But they have created a ban on mine use. In the Philippines, both the government armed forces, as a part of the government, they formally joined the Mine Ban Treaty. The insurgent groups have made public statements unilaterally adhering to a ban on anti-personnel mines. They won't use them even though they still have an armed conflict with the government. So this is probably the closest model that people can begin to unilaterally, combatants I'm talking about, can begin to unilaterally say, hey, this is not good for the people of our country, our people of our area. We shouldn't use these things. Currently, international funding assists in risk education programs, and it also assists in medical assistance for victims. So these are reactionary measures. It's hard for the international community to give funding for, say, mine clearance until groups pledge not to use new landmines, because clearance takes time and it costs money. And why would anyone invest in that if new contamination could occur?
Myanmar never signed the UN Mine Ban Treaty. Could this ever change in the future? And have the Myanmar army or ethnic armed groups ever committed to this?
Myanmar has never formally joined the Mine Ban Treaty. Some people have made positive statements towards it. The National League for Democracy and its committee representing the People's Parliament in the past made statements that they would join the Mine Ban Treaty as a matter of national urgency when they had the power to do so. That is not, they're not in power now. The military has said they would join the treaty after the difficulties that they're facing. It doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. A few of the non-state armed groups within the country, as we call them from outside, have said, well, we will stop using landmines, but those that said that had mostly already laid down arms, or there were two who said it and then returned to using landmines in the current situation.
What would be the implications of such a commitment?
The implications are you don't use it in your warfare. And this is something that's in their power. Like if they want peace tomorrow, that's not in their power. But to say, okay, well, that's not in our power, but to use the landmine is something that is a sovereign decision of that military group. They can say, hey, we're not going to use this, we'll use other methods for now.
Since the 2021 military coup, the number of armed groups has increased dramatically. Is anything being done to ensure they don't continue leaving behind landmines?
Well, needless to say, we as the International Campaign to Ban Landmines encourage non-use of mines by anyone, anywhere, anytime. That's all we can do. That's all the power we have, is to encourage people not to do it, to bring up the long-term consequences of that. So that is something we're doing. We would hope everyone would join us in that effort, obviously, as a campaign.
So how can we pressure armed groups to refrain from using landmines?
Pressure is not something that I find works most of the time. It needs encouragement, especially from the non-military components of every group should be raising their voices and saying this is not good for our future.
Given that you have dedicated your life to this work of our landmine awareness and eradication and witnessed Myanmar surpass other countries as the most deadly, how do you remain optimistic that change will come?
Because I see people change every day.
Do you have any personal experiences that have reinforced your optimism?
Well, just today, I was sending out a message on my social media that another state has ratified and now joined the Mine Ban Treaty. That happened just a few hours ago. So our treaty is still moving in the right direction, and I'm very happy to have put that out on my social media.
Where can people watching or listening to this interview be able to go to find resources to raise awareness about landmines in Myanmar?
There is minefreemyanmar.info. This is a place where they can go. Now that website is in English, but if you look for it on Facebook, everything is in Burmese language. And for the past 2 years, Mine Free Myanmar has been running a art contest on the theme of the impact of landmines on my community. It has cash prizes, and that is open to everyone within the country. Last year, there were 104 artists across the country from virtually every state and region who put in submissions. They could submit them in any language and in any medium.
Are there any specific organizations or initiatives that you recommend people support or get involved with to help address landmine crisis in Myanmar?
In every community that's being impacted by landmines, people who have survived the injury are frequently disabled. And people should reflect on how the disabled are treated within Myanmar. Disabled people worldwide are generally not treated very well. And put yourself in their shoes. If the same feelings you're feeling were coming at you, how would that be experienced?
We have seen some groups announce the removal of mine. What do you know about this?
I know that these groups are under a lot of pressure because some groups have captured territory. There are people living in those territories who want to go home because they've fled the conflict in their area. And so there's a lot of pressure on them to begin removing mines, and some of them have said they are removing mines. It's extremely important that these groups use international standards when they're doing their mine removal so that the area can indeed be safe for civilians to return.
So as we conclude, are there any additional messages or insights you would like to share that we might not have covered?
Armed conflict is going to end in Myanmar someday. This is a problem you're going to have to face. You can make it less onerous by making decisions now to stop using these random death traps.
Okay. So thank you for your time, Yeshua.
It's been a pleasure.